Welcome to the North American Fruit Explorers 2023 virtual conference. My name is Leslie Wade. I'm a volunteer board member of NAFEX, as we call it for short. I'm also our conference chair, co-chair, I should say, because I'm joined today by one of my co-chairs, Chris O'Mannix, who's going to be moderating today's forum. So before I introduce Chris, who is going to introduce our speaker, I'd love to share a few housekeeping items and just a little bit about NAFEX as we allow other people to join. First, this is a webinar, so unlike Zoom meetings, participants' audio and video features are automatically disabled. You'll notice that you can't chat with one another like you would in a Zoom meeting. This is to focus on the speaker, but we do want to keep the conversation going, and so that's how we'll use the Q&A function. So we encourage you to ask questions. We encourage you to share stories. We're just going to do it in the Q&A tab instead of the chat tab. Please use the chat tab if you have a technical issue. Otherwise, let's go ahead and keep that conversation in the Q&A section. And finally, the webinar is going to be recorded and it will be made available to members and conference participants after the conference at nafex.org, along with bonus resources like printable versions of our speakers' presentations. So just a few words about NAFEX for folks that might be joining us for the very first time. Founded in 1967, the North American Fruit Explorers is a network of individuals throughout the United States and Canada devoted to the discovery, cultivation, and appreciation of superior varieties of fruits and nuts. NAFEX members share ideas, information, experiences, and fruit propagating material via our website, social media channels, fruit-specific interest group meetings, and annual conferences like this one, whether it's in person in the future or online or both. So as a paid NAFEX member, you get 4 editions of the Pomona Journal each year, as well as the ability to search 50 years of back issues of the Pomona Journal in our digital library. And that contains a wealth of fruit growing information. There's also other features on our website that are available to members only that are very cool, like Eric Bina's fruit, what do we call it, parentage tree. So you can put up an apple and a pear, and if it's been researched and the answer is known, you'll see its genealogy and heritage, which is pretty great. So if you haven't already, we encourage you to visit our website to learn more about us at nafex.org. So it's my pleasure to introduce my fellow board member, Chris O'Mannix in the Pacific Northwest. He is going to be our moderator today for our very exciting talk with Eric Toensmeier. So please, Chris, take it away.
Thank you. Well, I would like to introduce Eric here. And Eric Toensmeier is a pretty prolific author on forest gardening and carbon farming, perennial vegetables. He's working on some new publications now. I hope he'll talk about, and he has a Patreon. You should check out. He's giving a talk today called Integrating Tree Vegetables and Perennial Staple Crops into the Orchard. And it's my belief that the orchard can be so much more than it is a lot of the time. And I think Eric will speak to that well. He's got a wide range of knowledge and experience, and he has finally started his farm. And so I hope he'll talk about that as well. But yeah, enough about me. Let's talk about Eric, and let's let Eric have the floor. So go ahead, Eric.
All right, great. Well, thanks, Chris and Leslie, for having me out. I've been a NAFEX fan for maybe going on 30 years now, so for a long time. Really what we'll be talking about today is some things that you can add to an orchard to diversify, to broaden the parts of your diet that can be met through the orchard. And there are a bunch of other things I would love to talk about that we won't get into in the slides, but I'm happy to talk about anything during the question and answer. So really what I mostly have time to cover here is the trees with edible leaves and perennial staple crops that grow on woody plants, but there's so much more, lots of things to talk about. So we'll get a chance to talk about those in the Q&A if we like. Let's see. So here we go. All right. So we'll sort of do this in 2 parts. There's sort of a tree vegetable part and a woody perennial staple crops part. And I'll just say, of course, I love fruit. In my former garden, we were growing about 50 different species of fruit. with multiple cultivars, and now I just moved to a place with 5 acres, so there's lots more room for things. I'm very excited. Lots of nut trees in, the fruit trees are going in next year and so on. But here we'll be looking at sort of some fruit is a wonderful and important thing to eat, and it's also good to eat vegetables and protein and fat and carbohydrates. So we'll talk about where those might come from in tree systems. So starting with trees with edible leaves, this is one of my favorite topics. We just I just had a book come out about this. This year or last year anyway. It's a free download. I'll show you where you can download it. And we just the Spanish translation came out earlier this year, and French came out like 2 weeks ago. So for any of you Francophone folks or with Francophone friends in Quebec, for example, it's available in French too, which I'm really, excuse me, really happy about. So what's a tree with edible leaves? Well, it's a woody plant, at least, 6 feet high. Some of them are really more shrubs than trees. Some of them are maybe more semi-woody, although not so much in the temperate climates. And the leaves or shoots are eaten as vegetables, not as like a culinary herb that you might put in, but like really actually a vegetable, whether cooked or raw, usually cooked, but some of them can be eaten raw. And globally, we found over 100 species are being grown for their edible leaves. Over 100 woody species are being grown for their edible leaves, which is a lot more than I would have ever thought. And excuse me, none of those are indigenous to the United States, excuse me, United States or Canada. So we have our work cut out for us, and there are lots of species worthy of cultivation, or I should say I'm not aware of them being cultivated. It doesn't mean it's not happening. I have ideas for things that grow around here. I live in Massachusetts, and I think there are some other candidates from other parts of the continent as well. And the first thing to say about trees with edible leaves is they're used kind of like any other edible leaves. You can cook them in all kinds of things. Some of them can go in salads and so on. So this is just a few examples of meals made with trees with edible leaves from temperate trees with edible leaves, and they look pretty good. I think I've very much enjoyed mulberry leaf lasagna, particularly myself. And they don't only have to be eaten fresh or frozen. They can be dried and powdered. They can be fermented. They can be made into leaf protein concentrate, which is this very interesting sort of like a tofu or a cheese that you can make from leaves. Very interesting. So basically anything that you might do with any other leaves in your garden, edible leaves in your garden, you can do with these. One of the real advantages of these trees compared to other leaf vegetables is compared to annual leaf vegetables, is that they're so easy to grow. They're easy to pick. You don't have to bend over, you don't have to till over the soil once they're established and so on. It's a very low maintenance system. In fact, after my first book on perennial vegetables, I met someone at a conference who runs a home gardening program for people living with HIV in Mozambique. And he told me that the trees with edible leaves were people's favorite because they were very easy to grow. They weren't physically demanding, and also they're highly nutritious. So they tend to be, in my experience, I really don't grow leaf crops in the summer anymore, annual leaf crops. I grow them in the winter in my greenhouse. I have some herbaceous perennials that I enjoy the leaves of in spring and some in fall. I have one that comes up all winter under the snow. But really from say like May through September, it's the trees with edible leaves are the leaves that I'm mostly eating. And I'll just say that the reason I came to this project is I had written an article, like a science article, that was a global inventory of perennial vegetables grown all around the world in all climates. We found over 600 cultivated species. And we also assessed their nutrition for the ones data was available for, a set of about 300 species of annual, biennial, and perennial vegetables. And we looked at their nutrition, especially the nutrients that people are deficient in. So there's one set of deficiencies that affect people in rural areas in the global south. My work mostly has been in like Guatemala and Mexico and the Caribbean there. So there's a set of deficiencies there, folate and iron and some other things. There's also a set of deficiencies that affects people in countries like the United States and Canada, where we are not eating enough fruits and vegetables. Probably most NAFEX members are eating plenty of fruits. So we looked at the ability of different vegetables to provide particularly those nutrients that people are most lacking. And we found that the group of vegetables that has the most of those nutrients is trees with edible leaves. Not that every tree with edible leaves is great, but as a group, they're the most powerful class. And for the temperate, temperate North America, these 6 species are the ones that have high levels of multiple nutrients, of the nutrients that are missing most in our diets. And I'll talk about these species later on. Some of them are very cold hardy. Some are more sort of like a mild, cool temperate or warm temperate kind of a setup. But anything with Siberia in the name, is probably pretty cold hardy. So these are vegetables that have multiple nutrients that we are missing most in our diets at levels way above anything you can find in the grocery store, any vegetable you can find in the grocery store. So I'd be happy to talk about that nutrient analysis more later if people like. And the key difference between the kind of pruning you do for trees with edible leaves and orchard trees and like fruit trees and nut trees is it's a brutal kind of pruning. It's a crude and brutal kind of pruning, very aggressive pruning, for a couple of reasons. Really, it's because it stimulates water sprouts, which is what you don't want, right, in your fruit trees. But in this case, those sprouts that grow really aggressively all year, most of these trees with edible leaves are going to be good to eat for maybe 2 or 3 weeks in the spring, and that's it on a normal sized tree. But when you prune them so hard like that with coppicing or pollarding or other techniques, they stay tender all the way through the whole growing season. So I've had mulberry leaves in Nevada that were still good in October, that had coppice like that. So very long season. It also makes them easy to reach for harvest, because who wants to climb a 70-foot tall tree to pick leaves? The lifespan is shorter than they might be otherwise, but you still get a few decades, which is a lot longer than spinach. Or if you don't prune them as often, they live for a really long time. These are just some of the pruning techniques. Coppicing, which is cutting all the way down to the ground. Pollarding, where you're cutting off maybe like 4 or 6 feet high, and leaving a lump or a branch system. Lopping, where you're cutting off branches higher up, and hedging. These are the ways that people typically grow these trees with edible leaves for almost all the species. And what was really interesting is, even though we're talking about plants from all over the world, these are the same basic techniques that are used everywhere. So even though they're species from different climates, the management is almost always the same, with a few exceptions. So let's look at a couple of examples. This is my very favorite, Chinese tune. It looks like an ailanthus or a sumac, or even maybe a walnut, but it is unrelated to any of those. It tastes like chicken soup. It's the most incredible thing. It's cultivated as a vegetable in temperate East Asia. It grows well for me here in Massachusetts. It's also used to shade coffee in Hawaii, so it has a broad amplitude. It can handle very low rainfall. And in my analysis of the world's vegetables, this was the second most nutritious of all, and by far the most nutritious of anything you can grow in temperate climates. There's a pink leaf variety called flamingo that I showed a picture of before, which is supposedly the best. I finally got my hands on some this year, so I will get to taste them next spring. It's mostly grown from root cuttings, easily grown. Once you have it, I love it so much. I planted a dozen this year. I want a lot. Then we have the various lindens, basswood, and so on. They have a very mild flavor, and a bit of a slimy texture, which a lot of people love and value. It's not what I'm particularly looking for in a vegetable myself. But I do snack on them as I walk by. I put them in things I'm cooking and they make a nice thickener in soup. They're actually distantly related. They're in the same family as okra, so they have that kind of thickening um, effect. And unlike a lot of our other tree vegetables, they do have a very mild flavor. They go great in a sandwich instead of lettuce, that kind of thing, and quite shade tolerant as well. Tree purslane, this is a kind of salt bush. It grows from the Sahara Desert to the misty coastlines of England. So that is quite a climactic range. It's not that cold hardy, zone 7. But it tastes like pretzels. It's unbelievable. Salty, tastes like salty spinach, extremely nutritious. And our native 4-wing saltbush can be used similarly, although I find it doesn't taste quite as good. But if I lived where it would grow, I would certainly grow it. We have sassafras. This one is native to the eastern U.S. and I was shocked by how much I liked it this year. I'd been put off for years because I heard that it maybe cause cancer because it has safrole in it. It turns out that the safrole isn't really present in the leaves, and any that is destroyed by cooking. So I'm no longer concerned about toxicity with sassafras leaves. And I served them to a bunch of people at some workshops this year, and people were very impressed with the flavor. Sort of a little bit of a root beer flavor, very nice tender growth when it's young. Really a great vegetable. So I'm very enthusiastic about that. Mulberry. There are, we always think about mulberry as a fruit, or I was always trained to think about mulberry as a fruit, and then to think about mulberry as food for silkworms and for goats and so on. But the leaves are good for people to eat as well. That's Morus alba, Morus nigra, Morus rubra, and their various hybrids. They need to be cooked. They're really not very good raw. And what I found of all the mulberries I've tried is some have a bad texture, some have a bad flavor, some have both, and some have a good texture and a good flavor. So it's a matter of identifying the ones that have good flavor and texture. And one of the great things NAFEX has to offer is a huge group of people growing lots of named varieties of mulberry. So it would be fun to do a little survey or something about what having people try some of the leaves next spring and see what's good. My favorite at the moment is one called Fruitless, which is a male that doesn't fruit. It's an ornamental variety, but very large leaves, very, very good eating. Northrop and Pendula are also good. Illinois Everbearing is sort of okay. So it's a matter of just learning what's good from what's out there. One of the world's most nutritious vegetables, absolutely one of the top vegetables in the world. We have edible leaf goji. In goji, there's two real, sometimes they're classed as one species, sometimes it's two. There's Lycium barbarum that has the narrow leaves. Those are more bitter. That's mostly a fruiting species. Then we have the wider leaf types, rounder leaf types, which are sometimes considered Lycium chinense. That's the one that's grown as a vegetable in Asia. I quite like it. It's not super high yielding, but it's really good. And you can eat the whole tender shoot, all the tender shoot and its leaves and stuff. Very nice. And I usually cut it back in midsummer and get a second flush. I think if you had a long enough season, you could do it again. Hardy to zone 4, can handle as little as 12 inches of rainfall. Great choice for certain areas. I should mention that the one that tastes like chicken soup, the Chinese tune, can handle down, I think, to 10 inches of rainfall a year. So there are some of these species adapted to very dry conditions. Speaking of which, nopala cactus. There's been a lot of breeding work lately on cold hardy nopala cacti, or cold hardy thornless cacti anyway, for eating the pads or for feeding to livestock. The best of those at the moment are hardy to zone 7. There are certain other very low growing, they're not really trees, they're only grow like 6 inches tall, but Opuntia basilaris aurea or some of the Anglomaniaes and stuff are mostly spineless, but they still have these tiny spines you can't see that really get you. So I prefer the truly spineless types. This is one of the highest yielding vegetables in the whole world. There are also varieties that are grown for their fruit, of course, and many of you will know those very well if you live in California or what have you, Arizona, but also a really excellent vegetable. And you can pick them when they're ripe and store them for weeks without them starting to shrivel up or anything. So that makes a great storage without refrigeration. There's also this whole set of members of the Aurelia family, sort of like your ginseng relatives, that are all spiny and all cultivated in East Asia, and all are or potentially could be serious weeds. So I'll present this with a real a note of caution. But they are, I'm always interested in things that are grown as a vegetable somewhere. I feel like that sets them a cut above any other candidates. Our native Aurelia spinosa could be used this way as well. Mostly with these, it's the shoots rather than the leaves, with the exception of the Eleutherococcus species, which I misspelled there. Sorry about that. They tend to have kind of a strong sort of celery, parsley, angelica kind of flavor. These are some of the most nutritious vegetables in the world. Again, not to keep berating you about that, but it is true that they're highly, highly nutritious. The 5-leaf Aurelia, I really like. I'm growing that, and it's very shade tolerant, which in an orchard can be very handy, of course. And just a few other tree vegetables that are not trees with edible leaves. Flowers of our various red buds across the country. The green fruits, the unripe fruits of slippery elm, and also Siberian elm, which is a big weed, but if you eat the fruit, of course, it won't. I wouldn't necessarily plant it as a vegetable, but if you live where it grows, you might as well pick and eat a bunch of it. That'll help to slow down and spread. The unripe seeds of Kentucky coffee bean, which I had always heard were highly poisonous, but now a bunch of people have been having very good experiences with, and I quite like them. I found them kind of like fava beans. The unripe fruits of silverbell, Halesia caroliniana, which I've never caught one at the right stage yet, but I'm told they taste like cucumbers for a few weeks. And then the flowers and flower buds of yuccas, which are arguably not terribly woody, but for purposes of this conversation, we can fudge on that a little bit. And there are some others, but these are some of the best of the, like people will eat the young pods and young seeds of honey locust as a vegetable, for example. So we do have some, we don't have the best tree vegetables in the world, but we have some very nice ones, and we should take advantage of them. So if you're interested in this book, Trees with Edible Leaves, you can download your free copy at perennialagriculture.institute, in English, French, or Spanish, as I mentioned. So that was part 1, Trees with Edible Leaves. Now we'll move to part 2. Oh, and we are doing pretty well on time here. Now we'll move on to perennial staple crops. So staple crops are, in my definition, some people would say just means something people eat a lot and rely on. To me, a staple crop has protein, or it has fat, or it has starch, or it has, you know, more than one of those. And I've broken them out into some different categories here that we'll walk through. We'll look at some examples of annual staples that have those same nutritional characteristics, and then we'll look at some temperate perennial species that may be able to substitute for them. And we are much better at some categories than others. I should let you know. First is the basic starch crops. This would be like bananas and breadfruit and sweet potatoes and taro, things that we really mostly eat for the starch, which are delicious. They have low levels of protein, low levels of oil, mostly just starch. And the two main woody perennials we have in this category, the chestnut would be by far the most important, the various chestnuts, hybrids, the chinkapins, and so on. And the monkey puzzle would be the other one, which is, you know, you're waiting many, many years for them to fruit. And you need males and females, and the cones are large enough to kill you when they land on you. I admit that's not all ideal, but they do taste fantastic. And hopefully somebody will get around to offering grafted males and females. That would be, they do graft other araucarias, so it seems like it's possible. And I would very much like to see those offered. That's kind of like a zone 7 and warmer kind of a species there. Then we have balanced carbohydrates. This is where potatoes and corn and rice and wheat live. These are like very, very common staple crops. They have intermediate levels of protein and or oil. Um, and one of the biggest examples we have here are the oaks. And I just wrote, I'll show you later, it's another free download. I just wrote a new little publication. It was like a 30 or 40 pager on the oak cultivars that are available in currently commercially available in the US and Canada, and also cultivars that used to be and have been abandoned or are not currently available. There's sort of two tracks of breeding right now. There's people working on sweet oaks that are low in the tannins that make them bitter, but also yielding well and bearing every year and so on, overcoming these other challenges of oaks. But there's another kind of whole breeding program here, which is looking at getting high yields and annual yields and not worrying about the tannins and figuring either deer will come and eat them and you can eat the deer, or pigs will eat them and you can eat the pigs, or you will process them for starch. In South Korea, there are big factories that do that. So they eat somewhere between 1 and 2 million tons a year of acorns in South Korea. And also I write some about what's happening in South Korea, and I write some about Spain, where there's a much longer tradition of growing grafted sweet oak varieties, cultivars, excuse me. So the oaks are certainly interesting. And the other big category we have, class of trees we have in this basic carbohydrates category, are legumes with edible pods. We have the mesquites, and there are some people working on selecting improved cultivars of Prosopis glandulosa. This species actually grows all the way into southern Colorado. So there are apparently some zone 6 cultivars of, or whatever, local genotypes or whatever of mesquite, which is delicious to eat raw and is processed into all kinds of things. I use it as flour all the time. I cook it in things. You can make syrup from it and so on. The carobs, which are they really temperate? They're probably more subtropical, but I know some of you are in California, so I thought we could include them. And honey locust for the rest of us. That's the pod for the rest of us. And there are sweet cultivars, grafted cultivars, and a lot of seedling cultivars available these days. There's been a lot of breeding work in the recent period, or selection from trial orchards that were set up often in the 1920s and 30s and 40s. People have gone back, found those best cultivars, collected seed, collected grafting wood. This one can also be, you can just chew on the pods. You can make powder, you can make syrup. A lot of people, most of the excitement about them right now is as a food for livestock, but also very much a food for human beings. And there are a surprising amount of fruits that came through in my nutrient analysis as staple fruits, in that they have sufficient protein and or oil to be roughly analogous to wheat or rice. Mostly it's things that have lots of seeds inside, and I suspect it's the seeds rather than the fruit that's actually giving a lot of the impact for them. And when I actually ran the numbers on like how much they yield and what their water count is, so we could really compare them well to wheat, they don't always rank as well as it would appear. So in other words, you would have to eat an awful lot of them to get what you need. But some of the Saskatoon yields are pretty good. Autumn olive yields are great. They're illegal to grow here in Massachusetts and probably unadvisable for most of you. Mulberry, whatever genus, whatever species you're talking about. We have a couple of viburnums that are very high in fat, which is really interesting. So we do have some of these small fruits that have some potential to be thought about as more of a staple crop. Phil Rutter, who used to run the American Chestnut Foundation, and he runs Badger Set Research Corporation. He's a chestnut and hazel breeder. He told me he's looked at Saskatoons and other Juneberries as a potential staple crop, not the varieties with lots of flesh, but actually the ones that are mostly seed. Those are the ones that are better as staple food for people. So that's interesting. I'm a big fan of that genus, and I grow a couple different species one of my favorite fruits in general, but also fun to think about the fat and protein that's provided by those almond flavored seeds inside there. The category we do worst at here with woody plants is protein, and even we have some, there are some temperate herbaceous vines that make good beans, like Phaseolus polystachios and the runner beans and so on, groundnut beans, Apios americana. But in terms of woody plants, I really only have one worth mentioning to you, and it's not really ready yet, which is the Siberian pea shrub. People eat them now when people get really hungry. And like in the Canadian plains, in hungry years, people used to eat them. I think it was one of those things where you would boil it in a couple changes of water. But when you think about the tens, hundreds of thousands of linear miles of windbreaks of this species that are cutting across the plains of Saskatchewan and Manitoba and Alberta, the number of every one of them an individual seedling tree, if somebody could go out and test those for their bitterness and for any other toxins that might be in there, the perfect Siberian pea shrub tree bean might already be waiting for us. But for now, so that's sort of a dream in the future. It's just the best one we have, unfortunately. Whereas protein oil, we're doing great on. These are crops like your soybeans and peanuts and sunflower seeds and so on that have both high oil and high protein. They're outstanding staple foods for people. And we have many nuts that meet this criteria, the high bar of at least 15% protein and at least 15% oil. All of our various species of walnuts and hybrids, our various species and hybrids of hazelnuts, our almonds and our hardy almonds. And there are a bunch of new hardy almond cultivars, late flowering, short season almond cultivars coming into the US right now, which is very exciting. Pistachios, yellowhorn, which is a less known one. This is they're sort of like hazelnuts in that there's a cool husk that opens up. That's not like hazelnuts. And then inside are all these smaller nuts, each of which has its own shell you have to crack. It's being grown more as an oil plant, I think, at this point, than as a nut, but it makes a very nice nut too. And it's very, very suited to dry conditions. Like you'll find it in the Denver Botanic Garden. It can handle that level of cold and dry. It's from dry, cold, Western China, which is a good place if you're growing in, Nevada or Eastern Washington or Eastern Oregon or cold, dry places. And then that region of China is a good place to look. Then we run into our oil crops. So we have two. This is either fruits, let's say, that are high in oil, or fruits and seeds that are pressed for oil, or nuts that are high in oil that are eaten as such. We have the hickories and pecans, and there's been, I'll just say, in case you're not up to speed, there's been a lot of excitement about yellowbud hickory, formerly known as bitternut hickory, or also known as bitternut hickory, in recent years, starting with Sam Thayer, who is really the sort of leading, who just put out this incredible wild edibles book anyway, for the Eastern and Central North America, and it's been picked up by Yellowbud Nursery, among others. The yellow buds have a really thin shell and really ideal qualities for expressing the oil, for pressing the oil. And the oil is of excellent quality. It's not bitter, unlike the nuts. And it hybridizes like crazy. So there are all kinds of, I have a couple of hybrids with shagbark hickory that are going out here into my backfield next year. So in terms of oil production, those seem very exciting. And of course, there are lots of interesting species in that genus for nut production. We have the nut pines, none of which are super high yielders except for Pinus pinea, the Italian stone pine, sort of the Mediterranean species. They're delicious. They're not real easy to process in my experience. There's a lot of resin on the cone, and then you're trying to crack out, then each tiny nut has to be cracked out. But I will be planting some dwarf ones here. There's some Pinus pumila species that are small. The BB tree, one of the most highly rated by beekeepers as a source of pollen and nectar for insects, but also the seeds are pressed for oil. So I don't know if they're edible outside of being pressed for oil, but I'm curious about like feeding them to livestock and things like that. I've got a couple of those going in this year, available from Logi's greenhouse. And then 2 stone fruits that are grown in Asia for their seeds, which are pressed for oil. Both are from these kind of like dry, cold parts of China, the cherry principia and Manchurian apricot. Certainly worth playing around with. And then we have some oily fruits from which you can press oil or eat them directly. We have the hardy avocados, which are, you know, quote unquote hardy, but they're hardy into the warmer parts of zone 8. So they're quite a bit hardier than other ones. And if you haven't seen the Florida Fruit Geek, that's Craig Hepworth, who's based in Central Florida, who's been doing, along with some other folks there, some great work on selecting and trialing varieties of the Mexican subspecies of avocado that are much, much more cold hardy than any of the other avocados. And one of the really cool things about those is that you can eat the skin, which is great. I think they taste fantastic. I've had the opportunity to sample a few, and I'll be putting those in my new greenhouse here. On the other side over here, we have olives and hardy in zone 8, and not only for Mediterranean climates. There are a couple of varieties that people are having success with in the Southeast, like in Florida and Georgia and Alabama. And in that case, you can press for oil, or you can, you know, cure the olives and eat the olives themselves. Also, I think a really beautiful tree, and sort of famous for living 1,000 years or more. So that's, you can't really ask for more in terms of longevity from a fruit tree than an olive. And in the middle, we have sea berry, called sea buckthorn by everyone outside of the United States, which is, you know, a sour fruit that is easily grown, but not always as easily managed once it's planted. It's kind of suckers and it's thorny and stuff. You need males and females, which is frustrating, but it is high in oil, along with all kinds of other fantastic vitamins and minerals and stuff. And it actually makes more oil per acre or per hectare than like sunflower seeds do. So, and there are some people commercially producing the oil, or you can also just eat the fruit and appreciate the oil that way. So those are some interesting oily fruits to talk about. And I think I'm running ahead of schedule. In fact, that's fine. We can have some fun. So here's a couple of publications. My book on carbon farming has 5 or 6 chapters on perennial staple crops of the world. So we go into, you know, long lists of species and then profiles of a bunch for different climates. And then here's the one that the publication I just put out about oaks, which that one actually is available at a different website. That's at perennialsolutions.org. It was a lot of fun to work on. I got to interview a bunch of the leading oak breeders in the United States and Spain. I wasn't able to get anybody in South Korea. But it's just amazing to hear the story of these, you know, first there was a selection made in 1920 by so-and-so, and then a seedling of that was picked up by this person, right? So Fred Ashworth, selected the Ashworth Burr oak in way back in the early 20th century. And then seedlings of that went to Miguel Marquez in New Mexico. And then some of his crosses of that went to Ken Asmus of Oikos Tree Crops, and now are available for us to plant, and some he offers cyanwood of some of those things as well. So just to sort of start to trace the pedigrees of some of these oaks and see what's out there was really exciting and interesting. Since I do have more time than I thought, I might just mention a couple of the other kinds of categories of of trees that of woody plants that are worth thinking about. Let's see. Well, the one I always go to first is thinking about nitrogen fixation. To the degree that nitrogen fixing plants are functioning healthily, they'll add more nitrogen for neighboring plants to grow. And we have many native nitrogen fixing plants, a lot of which are fantastic for beneficial insects. But we also have a lot of interesting ones from other parts of the world as well, to make some space. The next category would be species that are particularly valuable for beneficial insects and pollinators to help with some pest control in the orchard or to increase populations of pollinators. And for that, I would really recommend a couple of books by the Xerces Society, which I'm not seeing just right here. Oh, here they are. Both of which include a number of woody plants, and then one is attracting native pollinators, and the other is farming with native beneficial insects. These are just great. I return to them again and again, and for each region of the country, they have recommended species, again, including woody plants. I'm also I'm working on a book right now about trees whose leaves can be fed to livestock. That trees that have particularly high levels of protein and high digestibility. Mulberry would be on the top of the list. Tagesasti is very high on the list. That's nitrogen fixing one. A lot of people like black locust, although I don't love suckering things with thorns. Mimosa, which is terribly weedy. Sourgum, saltbush, including our native salt bushes. On and on down the list. There are quite a few of those. And if you're also raising, let's say, some goats or sheep or cows, that can be a great thing to mix into the orchard. I also like to think about what's going on underneath the orchard, what's happening in the understory. What are the things we can grow to make money or extra food or for other reasons. I loved at Phil Rutter's farm at the Badgerset Research Farm. They had lots of daffodils growing under their hazelnuts, which they sold as a cut flower. So that was their early season income there. There's lots of very interesting vegetables for shade, like Caucasian spinach, which is the climbing one. There's one called Korean celery, which here for us produces all winter long, which is pretty fantastic. That's Distania tachysimeana. And there's been a lot of studies lately on the compatibility of certain kinds of grasses and legumes with trees. That is, what grasses and legumes can you sow underneath your orchard that will compete the least with your trees? In other words, that allow for the largest amounts of tree growth, that fight the least. And there's a great article by Jerry Van Sambeek about that, where he goes into great detail on something like 50 or 60 different annual and perennial cover crops and ground cover species that could be most or least compatible. Alfalfa was one of the least. Tall fescue was one of the least. Clovers were mostly good. Orchard grass was mostly good. So it's just been fun to sort of see more and more. We're learning more and more about what kind of species can be included, what their relationships are to each other, how they can be combined in such a way that that they get along in the best ways possible, and that the goal is to sort of maximize cooperation and minimize competition. Goldenrods are on the naughty list in that case. Most of the fescues, besides tall fescues, most of the fescues are on the good list. Alfalfa's on the bad list there. So it's a lot of fun to see what's coming out of the research in the world of agroforestry, especially on those things. Is very interesting. So I think we could go ahead and take some questions. And sorry, I went through faster than I thought. Sometimes I worry that I'm not gonna finish in time, and then I finish a little too early, and then we have more time for Q&A. That's not the worst.
Well, thank you, Eric. You went through a large spread of information, and I always enjoy learning from you. So one of the things that I noticed, and somebody actually just pointed out, is that your perennialsolutions.org website currently says suspended.
Oh, did it crash again? It's been having trouble lately.
Yeah.
I'll get on it. Meanwhile, I
So,
think you should be able to find that Oaks one on some other spots. I think a few other people have got that one up. I'll make a note for tomorrow.
and
Web down.
then, oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, is this an ancient website that I'm sort of propping up until such time as I overhaul it? And I guess it's time to have another go at that. So,
And
great.
then I actually had a question. I think I really am curious about the Tetradium, the Denelii.
Yeah.
I was actually just looking at that tree in the Washington Park Arboretum, and I've looked at it over the years, and the fruits are so beautiful. And people don't know they're actually in the citrus family, and I think they're not far away from like a Szechuan pepper or a Sancho pepper. However, I don't think they're eaten as fruits. But you mentioned that it's an oilseed crop. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, I got this great guide that reports on a bunch of work that was done on agroforestry systems in North Korea, which is not a place I get a lot of news from. This is from the
Nobody
World
does.
Agroforestry Center. Yeah, that's from the World Agroforestry Center. And it goes into great detail on the different kinds of systems and the woody species that are used and the spacings that are used. So if you're looking for information on like, heart nuts and Korean chestnuts and seaberry and mulberry and Korean avodia and all the ways those things are being used there. I think I can put my fingers on it over here. Here it is. This is a free download. It's called Participatory Agroforestry Development in DPR Korea. I found it really fascinating, really fascinating. It's a part of the world where people are hungry, so they sort of have to innovate, and also where people are farming on steep hillsides, growing corn and stuff on steep hillsides, which leads to terrible erosion problems. So there really is a need for contour plantings of trees and shrubs along those hillsides to prevent erosion. That's mostly something you see in places like Guatemala. I've seen it there quite a bit. But in this case, it's in a boreal climate with like, USDA Zone 4 and stuff. So it's a great example to see what some of these intensive agroforestry systems look like. And that species is being grown there in agroforestry systems and pressed for oil. I haven't gotten to try it yet, but I do have four brand new trees ready to go, and they're sitting in my greenhouse waiting for spring. So, and it is an absolutely spectacular tree for pollinators when it's in bloom. It's really amazing to see all the things that come to it. And I would imagine anybody with an orchard might be interested in putting in one or two just for that purpose.
And I'd recommend also the Sancho pepper, the Szechuan pepper, which they also have a lot of insectary function. And I was surprised you didn't include that as a leaf crop because they are delicious. But I mean, there's 1,000 more plants, right?
I think of
So,
it as a culinary herb
okay.
more than as a vegetable, but I love it. I grew some of our native ones, Anthoxylum americanum, for a while. It was just too weedy and thorny for that particular garden. I'll definitely get it going here again. But the dried fruits you use like a Szechuan pepper. It's spicy and makes your mouth a little numb. But the leaves, it's in the citrus family, right? The leaves have this like somewhere between like citrus and chili and I don't know
Yeah.
what. Most incredible aroma, amazing to cook with. And I'm told that the leaves, I did grow Sancho pepper, which is Xanthoxylum simulans, I think. Didn't survive the winter for me up here. So Xanthoxylum americanum is hardy to zone 4. That's the toughest of any of them in terms of cold. You do need male and female plants. And right now, no one offers male and female plants that I've been able to find. So you have to grow them out from seed and wait until they flower. It's sort of a perfect NAFEX kind of project for somebody out there. And then you can make them available through a nursery as labeled male and female plants, which would be which would be really great.
There is a Sancho selection at Hoyt Arboretum in Portland that appears to be self-fertile. However, it's surrounded by a whole bunch of other compatriots in the same genera. So it may be hybridizing, but I don't think it is or that much because it's just it's prolifically setting. There's some woody lianas in that genera as well. They smell horrible, but I've been told they're really foul. But I've been told they're used as medicine. Somebody mentioned wanting to know that publication again, and it was Participatory Agroforestry Development in DPR Korea, Democratic People's Republic of Korea, and that's at FAO.org.
That's a deep cut right there, but it is a really, really good read. It's quite fascinating. It's 230 pages long. I mean, it's pretty serious business. I would just add a couple of other spice trees really worth growing in temperate areas. Carolina allspice, which is pretty fantastic. Peeled back bark is similar to cinnamon. Spice bush, the dried fruits are very nice. One of the best pies I've ever had was a pawpaw cream pie with spice bush and Carolina allspice in it. It was a very memorable pie. And there's lots more. I mean, really, there are so many. The nice thing about some of those spices is they are more shade tolerant and they can grow sort of in the shade of some of your other larger fruit trees and stuff, which is nice. I always appreciate when we can get multiple layers of things going.
So there's been a lot of mulberry questions. People love mulberries. One of the questions is, and you kind of addressed this too, earlier, so Rocco asked, mulberry leaf, does that include Native American mulberry? That'd be Morus rubra. And of course, there's a controversy around, are there any pure Morus rubra left? There appear to be a few, but most of it's hybridized. And then John Allen asks, is there a superior cultivar for leaves? And if you could just go over some of the cultivars again, I think that's of interest.
Yes. Okay. So yes, Morus rubra definitely has edible leaves to the degree to which it still exists. It's reported to be delicious. I haven't had it yet. And the same is true for the Texas mulberry, Morus microphylla, which grows in the Southwest. Those are edible also. I suspect some are better than others. I will say there is a lot of excitement about Morus rubra, and a lot of people out there trying to identify pure Morus rubra individuals in the wild, try and bring it back, try and kind of rescue that species back from the mostly hybrid state that it's in, which I think is great and important project. If I'm growing it for food, I'm just, I just want it to taste good mostly. So I do intend to get some rubras here, so I can evaluate them as leaf vegetables. Where I live, almost everything are hybrids. This is an area where there was silk production back in the 1800s, failed attempts at silk production. So all of our mulberries here are hybrids. So what I do is I go out in the spring and I just collect, the young tender leaves from a bunch of different individual wild trees coming up in parking lots and stuff. And I label them and I take them home and I cook them and I see which ones I like best. And then I try and graft off of those or take cuttings off of those or whatever, which I think anybody can do. But what would be a greater service would be for people with good collections of mulberries to sample those mulberry leaves and report, for example, through Pomona, which ones are good and which ones are better, which ones they liked and didn't. I'll say Illinois Everbearing. I thought it was just kind of okay. Wasn't fantastic. Northrop, I was very impressed by. That's one of the really cold hardy ones. And the one that I like best right now is called Fruitless, which is a male clone that's grown as an ornamental in Nevada and the cold, dry West. It has really large leaves. They're very tender. They're tender for a long time. That's currently the one to beat for me. I have reports that kokuso is not good, just too bad because it has
This was bad. Yeah.
bummer. And then I have a friend, Josh Jameson, we were talking about before,
Yeah.
who has selected an edible leaf mulberry, is the name of the cultivar in Florida. I think maybe it's a Niagara because it died even in my greenhouse here in the winter here in Massachusetts. So not hardy. There's some nice ones that have been selected in Mexico. So it's sort of either go find one or just ideally we find out that, like Wellington tastes great and everybody can just order that because it's already out there in the trade. That would be, well, to me, the project is let's evaluate the mulberries you can actually buy by name first. And I
Yeah.
just don't have enough of a collection of those here yet to do that. I was on a very small piece of land until 2 years ago, so I will have more and more of that to play with. And I think in each region they're going to end up being different winners and losers. But I am just stunned by how nutritious it is, and we really know a lot about how to grow mulberry for leaves because of the silkworm industry. There are something like 1 million acres of mulberry grown for the leaves in China. So like we know how to grow this. We know like the spacings and the cutting frequency and the yields and all that stuff on mulberry much better than any other tree with edible leaves anywhere in the world. Just not for the purpose of people looking. And interestingly, in China, where a lot of it is fed to silkworms, the leaves that the silkworms won't eat are powdered and added to baked goods. So millions of people every day in China eat mulberry leaf powder in their bread and in their noodles and everything else. So it is a really widely consumed leaf vegetable. Probably the most widely consumed is moringa, which is a tropical one. Polycactus and mulberry are probably the next two most widely consumed.
I'd like to say that of the ones I've tried so far that I've liked the most, mulberry wise, are again Northrop was high up there, and one called multicollis, which was brought into the South for silk production via France, which it came from China, and inside an ancient cultivar. It's a little bit pendulous. It's a pure Morris alba, and the leaves are very delicate. And the one from Josh Jameson, my understanding is there was a workshop, it might have been University of Florida, and they were doing research into, or they did like a taste test of a whole bunch of these selections of mulberry that people thought were good. And there was some 30 selections, if I remember correctly, and there were a couple that came up to the top, and the one is one of those like hardly dormant or not dormant at all Morris alba that just fry down with any frost. So, and I've heard Skinner seedling is okay.
Okay, I should add the one of the weeping ones. I think it's pendula. I thought was pretty good.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of confusion about mulberries and about Morris alba, and some of them you can grow easily from cuttings like live stakes and just stick it in the ground and it'll grow, and others won't. And I learned recently as I was working on this tree fodder book that what we call Morris alba is really a complex of like 6 or 7 different species. So I think that, which are very hard to tell apart. And I think that maybe accounts for why some are hardy and some aren't, and why some grow from cuttings and some don't, is we're not even actually talking about the same species. So I don't know how to tell them apart yet, but I think that could go a long way in explaining some of these things that have always confused me about mulberries.
So there's been a couple questions about invasive, various questions about things that are invasive, and I think that you've given it a pretty good explanation as we went through things that are potentially invasive. Are there any particular ones that you would like to mention that people might want to watch out for?
Sure.
Again, just to remind people.
Well, the first thing I'll say is I always say start with what's native to where you are and then build out from there. It happens that we have no native cultivated species in the US and Canada grown for their edible leaves, trees grown for their edible leaves. Whereas in Southeast Asia, there's like 40. So we have a lot of catching up to do with the rest of the world. And Morus rubra and Morus microphylla, I think they actually just changed the species on that, but whatever, the Texas mulberry, some of our salt bushes, sassafras, those would be sort of some of the species on the top of the list of native ones that I would start to, basswood, those are some of the ones I would start to play with. But here we have a category which is an important, potentially important category of food. Globally, it's an important category of food. And all of the cultivated species are from outside of our region. So we're left in that place, right? What do you do there? You could start with things that are already known and grown here for other reasons, that are not known to be weedy, like linden would probably be in that category, to me. Whereas gojis are pretty weedy. Some of the mulberries are pretty weedy, although again, this fruitless cultivar I grow is a male that does not produce fruit. So that seems like a very good, strong candidate for people to experiment with. Another native one very much worthy of cultivation would be Aurelia spinosa. That's an eastern one. I know less about things from the west. Let's see.
I just wanted to move on some of the questions, if that's
Yeah,
okay.
right. So there's,
Um,
I try and flesh that out as best I can, and please don't be the person to bring the next horrible weed to where you live. Great.
yeah, you've always been an advocate of exercising caution. So Janet asks, in Wisconsin, we have oak wilt. Any species with best resistance?
Ooh, so far, no. So far is just it's pretty ugly. The oak wilt, sudden oak death seem to be things that oaks really are not well suited for. Let's see. I do touch in that guide on. I think the red oaks are a little bit more resistant than the white oaks as a sub genus there. But no, it's pretty ugly right now. I will say that what there is good resistance to in some oaks is weevils. And some chestnut people I was talking to about that couldn't believe that there was any resistance to weevils at all in oaks, because there is no resistance to weevils in chestnuts at all. You can't breed up from zero resistance, and there's just none. So there is good resistance to the weevils. And I'll add on the oaks that I was really surprised by just how, since the last time I took a deep dive on it, just how much work has been done and how many people are working hard on it, and how many more named cultivars there are than I thought, and how one could at this point. Nobody's really selling grafted ones except for Perfect Circle Farm has a few, and Grimo Nut Nursery. But I really think there's a niche for somebody who wants to come in and look at grafted oaks. I would say if you're in an area where lots of oaks are dying, it's probably not time to plant new oaks. The last thing I'll say about oaks, though, is that even some of the seedlings these days will begin to bear in as little as 3 years, which is unbelievable to me. And I have some grafted ones here. I planted a grafted Ashworth oak this year. It was 2 feet tall, and it made 3 acorns. So the issue of having to wait a long time for oaks to bear seems to be less of a concern with this, between grafted varieties or some of these elite lines of seedling propagated oak strains. So that's exciting. They're still not chestnuts, and they're not going to be chestnuts for a long time. But I'm very enthusiastic about them. I have a good number of them. I have different cultivars I've planted out here.
Forrest Johnson says about mulberries that they have Illinois everbearing, Trader, and contorted. They lost pendula, but would love cuttings, please. And they're in British Columbia, so that's going to be difficult. But he says that they're having success with the BB tree and Hyptocodium. I'm not sure. for late pollen and nectar. And he says, thank you for the presentation and thank you to the organizers. And he's also looking for Prunus spinosa in Canada. It's so hard. I wish I wish we could distribute stuff easier, you know? I think about that with like Korea and Iran and China and all these places, you know? I hope we have a more peaceful world in the future. So, in general.
Yes, indeed.
And then Juan Carlos, and somebody else mentioned that Traders is a really hardy variety of mulberry. I don't know the leaf quality. Do you? I've never tried it. Juan Carlos asks, do you have information about tree leaves used for drinking tea as aromatics or medicinal?
Well, I don't have comprehensive information about that, but I will say is people love persimmon leaf tea. Really love persimmon leaf tea. Both Asian persimmon and American persimmon tea is very popular and very good, very good. A lot of people like hickory leaf tea, especially from the buds of hickory. It's very popular. And what I've been growing is actual just tea. Camellia sinensis. I found there is a like the caffeinated tea that we drink every day. There is a hardy subspecies, Camellia sinensis, variety sinensis, that's hardy in zone 6. So I've planted out a bunch of seedlings this year, and we'll see who survives the winter. And then at that point, it's pretty easy to grow from cuttings, apparently. So that would be the tea to beat. Surely the world's most widely used tea from a plant. The other really interesting one from the southeast that I really like is Yaupon holly, which is another caffeinated tea. It's really only hardy to zone 7, although I've overwintered it. It just dies back and resprouts, and you can still get plenty of tea. The drawback is that from seed, it takes 4 years to germinate. So I don't really have that kind of patience, to be honest. That's a little more than I'm willing to wait for. So you can get ornamental cultivars, but it's hard. It's hard to get like conservation grade, just random seedlings to evaluate for hardiness and flavor and stuff. But the tea from it is delicious. I toast it, same as with the true tea. I'll toast them in a skillet and then use water. You can also ferment them. You know, there's a couple of great books. Oh boy. Oh, one's called Grow Your Own Tea. That would be a great one to start with. That talks about tea growing in the United States and in BC, and how to do all the processing and fermenting and stuff. That's another great shade-loving plant that can be a nice shade companion underneath or to the north side of various kinds of fruit trees and so on. I'm very enthusiastic about growing that here. That's like a just fun to see what kind of stimulants you can grow, I guess, in your orchard.
Where when I close the Q&A, it gets rid of Ryan Hoish. I'm sorry if I'm butchering your name, Ryan. He made a good comment, and this is something that I haven't seen any information about, but you may have. Wild plants respond to heavy browsing by increasing the production of secondary anti-herbivore compounds, or spines for that matter. Has anyone looked at the phytochemistry of edible leaves on perennials after consistent heavy pruning? How does that impact the human health from consumption?
That's a good question. I haven't seen any research on that, but most of the trees with edible leaves that have been looked at, it's been looked at a lot for livestock. And actually it doesn't have any kind of consistent, the sort of stand-in we use for all those weird, like secondary compounds and stuff, is we just look at the digestibility of the leaves. Because if a cow's digesting it, it can't be that poisonous, I guess, is the idea there. And I haven't seen any kind of consistent decrease in digestibility looking at studies like the mulberries cut back, and then they tested at 4 weeks, and they tested at 8 weeks, and they tested at 12 weeks of regrowth. It doesn't seem to impact digestibility, at least in the species that I've seen tested in that fashion. So I agree that that would be a thing to watch out for. I haven't seen any evidence that that's a problem in the species for which data is available. That's like a real backward scientist answer, but it's not a problem that I know of. How about that? That would be the regular way of saying
that. So somebody asked about cultivars of tune, and I know that the one that's promoted most commonly for eating is Flamingo, and that one does have good flavor. You mentioned it. I know there's a guy up in, I think it's Michigan, that has a whole bunch of cultivars, but he's hard to get a hold of. I heard about him. But in there, so Christy asks that she says that she loves the tune, but has there been any safety on eating this plant year round? And can it be eaten when the leaves are mature as well as young?
Sure. Well, okay. The first answer is there are lots there. I don't have any named cultivars. I just have seedlings, and they all taste great. So, I mean, I have Flamingo now ready to get planted out next year, but I haven't had a bad one for what that's worth. The older leaves are really tough and they have a bad texture, so I don't like them. And I'm not aware of any problem eating that year round, but I will say that there are a couple of cases where of various vegetables. One is a tree vegetable called katuk that, you know, millions of people have eaten for thousands of years on a daily basis and never had a problem. There was one guy who decided he was going to go on a juice diet where he was going to drink nothing but the juice of that species every day for a month, and he died. And you hear this kind of thing about like the person who saved up apple seeds all at once and then ate them. It's sort of like, I think it's probably not good to live only on the extracted essence of any one plant for a long period of time. I would say that would be unadvisable, even with something like kale, or lettuce for that matter. You should mix up what vegetables you eat. And if you were to, I wouldn't live only on the juice of any one thing for any extended period of time. That would be my thought there, I guess. Yeah.
So John Valenzuela asks, hi, John. He asks, considering another fruiting woody perennial that has edible leaves, though tropical, subtropical, any comments on the use and nutrition of Barbados gooseberry and Ora pronobis, Pereschia aculata? And he says, yes, it's mucilaginous. So that's a number of different things, but I don't know my perennial species that well. But you do, and I know this isn't really a talk about perennials as much as it is about temperates. But could you address that?
Sure, I wrote about that one in the book. It is grown as a vegetable in Brazil. It's also grown for its fruit in many places, but it's grown as a vegetable in Brazil. It seems like in a lot of the US, the main cultivar that's available is like a hanging one, like a sprawly ground covery one, or a hanging pot variety. But there are also shrub types that are upright. Yeah, I mean, it's quite good for you, and some people really love it. It's like within the cactus family, it's the one most likely to seem like it doesn't look like a cactus, but it's in the cactus family. So we think that the ancestors of all cactus looked a lot like Pereschia. If you happen to read Portuguese, I didn't, but I learned it just to read this book. There's this amazing movement in Brazil, the non-conventional food plants movement, who are doing incredible work. And this is their guide to the useful plants of Brazil. And what I love about it is for each species, it has a profile of the species, and then it has 3 recipes in full color for every one of like hundreds of species. And it was in here that I learned that species is grown as not only eaten as a vegetable, but grown as a vegetable, which was the line I was trying to draw. Here we go, Perennial aculeata. The line I was trying to draw for the book was really on what's being grown as a vegetable. I would love someday to write one about the non-cultivated trees with edible leaves that are worth cultivating. That would be a much longer book. And I think there's a lot more that I don't even. There's so many more that I don't know. I've heard, for example, that some of the western birches in North America are very good eating when they're young. I haven't had any, and I can say the ones that grow on my farm taste terrible. So we can rule that species out. But it's an interesting project to think about. Anyway, yeah, Perennial aculeata is great. That's a really cool one. Dual purpose, fruit and leaves. Very nice.
John had another comment about, he made mention that the Mexican avocados are used in Mexico as a tea. The leaf is used as tea. And then Christy asked, do you have any favorite cultivars of hardy avocados?
Oh, I would refer people to the article on Florida Fruit Geek about that. Like Del Rio is one that they really love there. They've been selecting a bunch of varieties in central North Florida for quite some time, and they're sending things back and forth with people in Texas, which is another place that's sort of like a hot spot for breeding those hardy avocados. The issue in the avocado world, one of the issues in the avocado world right now is this laurel wilt disease, which has been wiping out a lot of avocados. What Craig found, who runs that Florida Fruit Geek, is that they died back pretty hard, and then they resprouted, and they've been okay since then. So it seems like it's maybe not quite as devastating, or maybe the Mexican ones have a little more resistance than some of the like Caribbean or Guatemalan type avocados. Yeah, those will be the ones I'll grow in my greenhouse here for sure. We have the red bay is a species of avocado that is native on the east here that grows up into like Delaware and stuff. You don't eat the fruit, you just use the leaf as a spice. That's Persea borbonia, and there are some other ones in Mexico that are mostly used as spices. So it is really and regular avocado leaf is used as a spice too. So there's more to avocados than we often know here, I think. And then there's some, the great big banana shaped ones, and it's a super interesting genus. Very cool.
Brian Labin was mentioning a related species called, and I forget the species, it was called Cuyo Cuyo, I think it was. I don't think it's as palatable, but anyway, I think that was an avocado relative.
I don't know if
South America.
There's Persea scheidiana. There's a couple of other species.
This one was not a Persea.
Oh, it's not a Persea. Oh, then I have no idea.
Yeah, I mean, Pat Holland asked about, and this is an interesting tree, Toriana nucifera, and then we also have California nutmeg too. Could you speak to any of those?
Yeah, they're the Tories are interesting. They're basically kind of like U bush looking trees. They're evergreen conifers with edible nuts. It's kind of cool. I have not had the pleasure of having a good one. I've only had really old ones that didn't taste very good. The other very similar one, but they're cultivated in Japan as a fruit or as a nut. They have to be good. Then there's Cephalotaxis. There's a couple of edible species in Cephalotaxis that, again, I haven't had a good one. And the issue there is there's male and female plants, but all the cultivars are male, so it's hard to get your hands on the right thing. Cephalotaxis has the advantage of being really shade tolerant, which again makes it a great choice as an understory species in orchards for some people, I think. So I think the Tories are great. I didn't, have time to put everything in the.
Yeah, of course. Can you talk about the edibility of the plum use, but not the seed?
I know the fruit is edible. I can't remember if the seeds are edible on that or not.
It has a heart-stopping compound in it, so you do not want to eat the seed.
Sounds like a no. Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway,
Sounds
so that's one thing. I think that's one reason why it hasn't taken off. They're eaten in Asia, but um, Caitlin C asks for growing mulberry for fruit and leaf production. Does pruning midsummer affect fruit production? So it was arranged a little bit different. So sorry, I answered that or said that a little weird.
Sure. I do think it's possible to prune them from both. It's tricky because, you want more mature wood for the honestly, my mulberries always fruit really well. Even if they got cut back to a stump, they'll fruit on the new growth anyway. But you can leave more of a tree form on some branches and then just have some others that you would continually cut back every year. I've seen trees successfully making fruit while also having a couple branches that come out as shoots growing, 9 or 10 feet a year with edible leaves all the way along there. So I think mulberry is a case where you can have both. You just have to prune the different parts of it, accordingly. Because the
Um,
ones that grow for fruit won't make won't make a long season of the branches grown for fruit won't make a long season of tender leaves.
Sorry about that. Mark Amante says, any thoughts or knowledge on white fringe tree, Chionanthus virginicus, as an oil fruit or source since it is an Oleaceae?
My neighbor Steve Breyer of Triplebrook Farm, who was like my plant mentor, and for a lot of people around here in the Northeast, was a key plant, like one of the key people who many of us had our first persimmon and our first pawpaw and our first Asian pear and our first hardy kiwi, blah blah blah, at his house, at his nursery. He has tried it. He's tried pickling them. He had read that you can pickle them like olives or whatever, cure them, and he said he couldn't see how it was edible at all. So maybe he didn't do it right. Maybe he has bad cultivar. I don't know, but it did not sound like super promising to follow up on from his experience. Maybe he had it at the wrong stage. Who knows?
I would also caution people in using Oleaceae because my understanding is there are a lot of poisonous species in Oleaceae. So do your research. Is that your understanding too?
That one is listed as edible in a couple of sources, but none of
Oh,
them give me details on what to do with it at all. And it's way down on my list, I guess I would say. But yeah, I don't try anything unless I'm sure that it's not going to kill me. And then even then, sometimes I've messed up and thrown up and stuff. So, I tend to be cautious.
Mark Wolber says sea buckthorn is listed as invasive in some states. It is a runner in improved soils.
And it's related to autumn olive. So what else do you need to know? I guess really, right?
Yeah.
Um,
Caitlin C says, are any of these regen ag carbon sequestrating solutions being mentioned at COP28 at the end of the month? I know soil is now part of the conversation due to Saguru and the Save Soil movement.
Yeah, I mean, I was fortunate to be in Paris during the Paris Agreement, which to me is the moment when agriculture sort of like became part of the conversation on an international basis. Um, and increasingly, we see agroforestry and perennial crops, woody crops, more and more on the radar all the time. Mentioned more and more in the IPCC reports, including the recent one that just came out. Um, so yes, I don't think they nearly get as much attention as they should because they have so much of a more powerful impact on a per acre or per hectare basis compared to other kinds of carbon-friendly farming, which are all good. I'm not opposed to any of those, but the more trees, the better in terms of carbon. But I would say it's definitely still considered sort of a sideshow compared to, let's say, managed grazing, cover crops, nutrient management, improved low methane rice production, those kinds of things are reduced tillage. Those kinds of things are much more receiving attention, I would say. Yeah.
John Valenzuela asks again, where's all the, and I'd like to know this too, but where's all the carob germplasm in the United States? We only have random street selections in addition to Santa Fe. And this is the story, isn't it, John? The largest collection in California got bulldozed for houses in 1980s. I hear that again and again. You know, what are people thinking? But I know Joe at Planting Justice Nursery. You might want to go talk to him. But they have some cultivars they've recently collected. They're trying to get more. Gavin was saying they were trying to get more as well. But do you know?
I don't know who has them here in the US. Nope. I know some people you could talk to in Spain or whatever, but that's not super helpful for getting sign wooded. It's the same. We have the same thing here on the East with amazing work done by John Hershey when he was head of the Tennessee Valley Authority, and they bulldozed all the good honey locust varieties, and now he had this beautiful nursery in Downingtown, Pennsylvania, which people go to every year and collect. I'm sure they're writing things up for NAFEX. Every year they go back and more of them are knocked down and there's more suburbs up and stuff. We have sort of a problem with not protecting important collections of fruit and nut varieties in this country. They really should be parks or national heritage sites or something. And the only place I really know of that happening is Florida, where some great kind of protection work has been done like that. They're ahead of us.
Chris, take one more question after that. I couldn't agree more too.
Yeah, it apparently the Tennessee Valley Authority almost was like one vote away in Congress from creating a national agroforestry program. How the world would be different, right? So Mike Amato said, "Hi Eric, great presentation. Where can I get my hands on the cold hardy nopales?"
Let's see. Well, some of those are available through the USDA germplasm collection, which I found is a lot less willing to give out material than they used to be. I don't know if they had budget cuts or what, but they are a lot less giving than they were. I often ask around at actually, if you're in Colorado, Harlequin Gardens Nurseries has a couple of good varieties. They're in Boulder, but you have to go in person. That's not much good to most of us. Let me just go back and see.
I have a suggestion.
Oh yeah, great, please.
Planting Justice again. They've got, and also Fruitwood. They have most of Texas A&M selections, and so far, let's see. I trialed a lot of them. I trialed the entire collection, or almost the entire collection for Planting Justice, and the one that's come out on top has been, I'm sorry, I just remembered Desert Oasis. In terms, I'm zone 8B, 8A, depending on the season. But I'm gonna squeak one more in. Christy asks, I'm also interested in tree purslane. Those are the Atroplex bushy ones. For people to go look up on Google. Do you know if there's a way to reduce the amount of oxalates in it? That's a really good question.
Besides cooking, I don't know. I'm also worried about the amount of salt in that species, which is also a real challenge. Yeah, it's delicious, but you wouldn't want to eat a giant bowl of it every day. It's too salty. It's an incredible source of, calcium and magnesium and stuff, but there's so much salt that you can't actually access all of the nutrition, because if you ate as much of it as you needed, it would be less than ideal. So it'd be interesting to breed for lower salt content, or just to screen collections for lower salt content on that one.
Great. Well,
Epic.
thank you so much. Chris, you did a great job. Eric, thank you so much for this great information. Chris, do you want to say anything in closing? Because this has been an awesome topic.
I just suggest people go check out Eric's work. He was the one that his Perennial Vegetables book, what was that 2006 or something like that? That really completely changed my world, along with Cornucopia by Stephen Fasciola. Rest in peace. But Eric, you're a good dude, and you do a lot of really important work, and more people should follow what he's doing. I think there's there's so many different angles that you follow. It's impressive.
Well, thanks. That's very kind. I can't help it. It's a compulsion, as I think many of you are afflicted with the same compulsion at NAFEX as well. Well, thanks, Don, for having me. It's a treat. It's weird to come and not talk about fruit at a NAFEX thing, but fruit is wonderful, and when the world is full of other great plants too. So, and I learned a lot of what I know in the pages of Pomona. So, thanks very much, and
Awesome.
happy to be back anytime.
Well, let me close this out and say on behalf of NAFEX, I want to thank Eric, Chris for making this just completely awesome. I also want to thank our sponsors that make the conference possible, and that's One Green World Nursery, Copenhagen Farms Nursery, Fedco Seeds, orchardpeople.com, Southern Cultured Orchard and Nursery, and others. Once again, this is going to be recorded. If you want to see some of Eric's books, go to our conference page, scroll down to the pictures of the speakers, find his picture and click on that, and you'll see some of those titles if you did not jot them down. So we'll be posting a video of this recording in a couple of days, and about a year from now, it will migrate over to our YouTube channel. So we have some past recordings there, and of course, if you're a member, as you are, for those of you watching live tonight, we have past conference recordings on our website as well. So we'll have some other downloadable content. We're getting super excited about our upcoming sessions. We've got another one that's going to start here at the top of the hour, talking about apples around the world with Gail Volk and Derek Mills. It's going to be a great one. So thank you again for joining us. Thank you, Eric. Thank you, Chris. This has been great.
Have a great conference.
All right. Good night.